Discipline is the real freedom. Start acting like it. You've heard people say freedom is doing whatever you want. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. Real freedom doesn't come from giving in to every craving or skipping the hard stuff. It comes from doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. Discipline isn't a punishment, it's the path out of chaos. It's how you stop being ruled by emotion, distraction, or excuses. When you master yourself, you stop living on autopilot and start living with purpose. This video isn't about hype or motivational fluff. It's about training your mind to stay solid when life tries to shake you. Not once, not occasionally, but every single day. These aren't just words, they're tools. And if you let them sink in, they can change the way you carry yourself forever. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to build real strength from the inside out. In the comments, just write, "I'm showing up for me." No overthinking, just a small act of commitment. And don't just listen once. Play this again tomorrow, then again the next day. Share it with someone close who might need this reminder too. Because discipline doesn't grow in noise, it grows in repetition. 1. Freedom without discipline is an illusion. Most people believe that freedom is the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. That illusion is everywhere, in advertising, in social media, even in the casual advice we give our friends. Just follow your heart, they say, or do what feels good. But let's be honest, following your feelings doesn't make you free. It makes you reactive, impulsive, and often regretful. The man who eats without restraint, sleeps whenever he pleases, avoids hard conversations, and chases every distraction may feel free in the moment. But over time, he becomes a prisoner, not of society, but of himself. His lack of structure leads to poor health, missed opportunities, emotional instability, and a deep sense of aimlessness. And yet he calls that freedom? No, that's chaos wearing a mask. Real freedom begins the moment you say no to impulse and yes to self-mastery. It begins when you stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What kind of man am I becoming?" Because if you're always pulled by your moods and urges, you're not leading your life, you're being dragged through it. Discipline is not a cage, it's a compass. It points you in the direction of your values, even when your emotions scream otherwise. It shields you from the noise, the clutter, the temptations that promise pleasure but leave you empty. And the Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius didn't write about chasing comfort. He wrote about fulfilling your duty, showing up with integrity, and doing the hard thing when no one is watching. True freedom, he knew, is the power to do what's right, especially when it's not easy. That's why discipline equals freedom. When you commit to consistent, aligned action, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop relying on motivation, which comes and goes like the wind. You start building emotional self-control, sharpening mental toughness, and creating a rhythm that strengthens your identity through daily action. And when you show up for yourself each day, not perfectly, but faithfully, you begin to trust yourself again. That's a kind of freedom money can't buy. It's the freedom of knowing that no matter what life throws at you, you've trained your willpower step by step to hold steady. You've chosen structure over chaos, character over convenience. And most importantly, you've stopped outsourcing your peace to things outside your control. The man who lives without discipline may look free, but inside he's shackled by doubt, addiction, procrastination, and weakness. The man who chooses discipline may face friction, but inside he feels grounded, clear, and capable. So when you hear that voice telling you to rest when you should act, to scroll when you should focus, to delay when you should begin, remember this. That voice isn't leading you toward freedom, it's leading you toward decay. Your strength grows every time you ignore it and choose the harder path. Not because it's painful, but because it's purposeful. And that right there is what real freedom looks like. Not comfort, not escape, but full ownership of your life. 2. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline isn't. Most people spend their lives waiting for inspiration to strike, waiting to feel ready, waiting for a perfect morning, a better mood, or the right moment to finally begin. But here's the truth that stings a little. Motivation is a liar. It whispers promises it rarely keeps. It flares up one day and disappears the next. You say, "I'll start when I feel energized," but the energy never comes. You say, "I'll get serious when life calms down," but it rarely does. The man who builds his actions on motivation builds on sand. And the moment life shakes a little, it all collapses. I once worked with a guy named James. Sharp mind, big ideas, tons of ambition. But his favorite phrase was always, "Not yet. I'm waiting for the right timing." That was 3 years ago. I saw him recently. Same ideas, same talk, but nothing real to show for it. The Stoics warned us about this kind of life. One governed by feelings, ruled by whim, always postponing purpose for comfort. Motivation may feel powerful in the moment, but it's unreliable. Discipline, however, doesn't wait for mood. It doesn't care about your energy level, your schedule, or your comfort zone. Discipline shows up like a trained soldier, quiet and firm. It doesn't beg for permission. It acts. When you rely on motivation, you surrender control. But when you build discipline, you reclaim your power. You move even when it's raining, when it's dark, when it's lonely, when it hurts. That's what separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck. Not brilliance, not luck, not talent, but the ability to move forward without a mood check. Discipline is about setting a non-negotiable standard. A simple inner voice that says, "This is who I am. I do what I said I'd do, whether I feel like it or not." That kind of identity can't be faked. It's built in small, repetitive acts. Choosing the gym over the couch, the hard truth over the easy out, the focused work over meaningless scrolling. Over time, these small, consistent actions transform how you see yourself. You stop being the man who tries and start being the man who executes. And here's where things shift. Once discipline becomes your rhythm, motivation sometimes follows. You begin to feel momentum, clarity, pride, but only after action, never before. You don't wait to feel ready to act. You act, and through that action, you become ready. That's how self-discipline habits are formed. Not in waves of inspiration, but in the quiet resistance to your lesser self. You train your willpower step by step, like a craftsman sharpening a blade, not for show, but for reliability. And each time you follow through, even when no one sees, you prove to yourself that you're no longer a servant to emotion. You're the one in charge now. You've replaced hope with habits, potential with performance. That's where true identity through daily action is born. So if you're still waiting for the perfect morning to start, stop. That moment doesn't exist. What does exist is this one, this imperfect, ordinary, completely usable moment to do one small thing that builds your strength. Not tomorrow, now. That's not flashy, but that's freedom. 3. What you do in private shapes who you are in public. Let's stop here for a second, not to slow down, but to acknowledge something important. If you're still with me, if you're still listening after everything we've unpacked so far, then you've already done something most people won't. You've stayed. That alone says a lot. Most people check out when things get uncomfortable. They scroll away the moment a message hits too close. But not you. You stayed. That tells me you're not here for quick fixes or fleeting hype. You're here for something deeper. So what comes next isn't just advice. It's a quiet invitation to build something sacred, your inner integrity. Because here's the truth that many avoid. Your real character isn't formed when the world is watching. It's forged in silence, in the lonely hours, in the decisions no one sees but you. The Stoics understood this. They taught that discipline is not a public performance. It's a private practice. It's what you do at 6 a.m. when the alarm goes off and your bed is warm. It's what you choose when no one's tracking your progress. And it's what you refuse to compromise, even when no one's applauding. I'll never forget my old neighbor, Mr. Hill. He was a retired Marine, lived 3 doors down. Every morning at exactly 5:15, his porch light would flick on. No fanfare, no music, just quiet repetition. A light stretch, a short workout, 1 black coffee. He never missed a day. When I asked him why he kept doing it at his age, he smiled and said, "Because this is who I've chosen to be." He wasn't chasing dopamine. He wasn't filming it for social media. He was honoring an identity. That kind of consistency doesn't make headlines, but it builds something more powerful than a highlight reel. It builds self-respect. Because what you do when no one's watching, that's not just behavior, that's who you are becoming. When you hit snooze, it's not just sleep. It's a silent signal to your mind that comfort matters more than your word. When you delay your goals until tomorrow, that's not harmless. That's rehearsal. And over time, those micro decisions stack up. They don't stay private. They leak into your posture, your tone, your confidence. You start to carry the weight of your inaction even when you're surrounded by noise. On the other hand, when you keep a small promise, even something simple like making your bed or sticking to your morning routine, you build trust in yourself. Slowly, you begin to reshape your internal narrative from "I never follow through" to "I do what I say I'll do." That is how discipline equals freedom. Not because anyone else notices, but because you know. You start building inner strength, emotional self-control, and an identity forged by daily actions, not by random bursts of inspiration. And yes, no one may clap for it, no one may validate it, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. The gym reps when you're tired, the chapter you read alone, the breath you take instead of reacting. All of it matters. All of it compounds. So if you're wondering where to start there. Not in public, but in private. Don't wait for the world to see you before you become who you're meant to be. Practice in silence. Earn your discipline when no one's watching. That's the difference between the man who performs and the man who is. One fades, the other stands. Always. 4. Every excuse weakens your integrity. Excuses sound harmless at first. They wear the mask of reason. "I'm just too tired today. Now isn't the right time. Things are a little hectic." But underneath, they carry a far more dangerous message. A message that erodes something crucial: your integrity. Most people believe the real danger of excuses lies in disappointing others. But the real damage isn't public, it's personal. The true danger begins when you start believing the very lie you tell yourself. You cross a line, not when you speak an excuse, but when you start to live by it. It's like a crack in the foundation of a home. Invisible at first, then it widens. Water seeps in, the structure weakens, and by the time it's visible, the damage is already deep. Excuses work exactly the same way. They may begin as small rationalizations, but over time, they chip away at your ability to trust your own word. And once you stop trusting yourself, you stop showing up. You stop taking ownership. You begin living reactively instead of intentionally. That's why the Stoics warned us. The man who constantly defers his duty weakens the muscle of self-mastery. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." You may think you're just skipping a workout or putting off a tough conversation, but what you're really doing is rehearsing a pattern. You're training your brain to choose the easier path, the more comfortable option, the one that keeps you stagnant. And here's the part we don't say out loud. Those tiny compromises, they're not isolated. They stack up, slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up and realize you no longer believe in your own promises. You say you'll change, but deep down, you don't think you will. Not because you can't, but because you've seen yourself break those same promises too many times. That's the real weight of excuses. They don't just delay action, they steal your identity. And the longer they go unchecked, the harder it becomes to recognize who you once wanted to be. But there's good news. You can reverse the erosion. You don't need a full reinvention. You don't need to shout your intentions or announce your comeback. What you need is one honest action. One decision that aligns with the man you want to become. It could be small, 5 pages read, 1 cold shower taken, 1 skipped temptation. But when done intentionally, it sends a loud message back to your subconscious. I can trust myself again. That's how real change begins. Not with vision boards or motivational quotes, but with concrete actions that rebuild your confidence from the inside out. You don't need more time. You need fewer excuses. You don't need perfect conditions. You need clarity on what actually matters. Stop waiting for motivation to return. It won't. Stop negotiating with your limits. They won't move until you do. And stop telling yourself next week will be different if this week is exactly the same. Choose the discomfort of discipline over the pain of regret. Choose the act that silences the excuse. That's how you rebuild trust. Not with words, with evidence. With daily proof that you are no longer the man who postpones, you are the man who acts. And that shift from excuse to execution, that's where freedom lives. 5. Do it even when it hurts. Especially then. Pain always has something to say, and most of the time it tells you to stop. It tells you this must not be the right path. It whispers that if it hurts, maybe you're not ready, or maybe this goal wasn't meant for you. But the truth is, pain isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign you've reached the threshold where growth actually begins. Most people don't quit because their goals are too big. They quit because they expected the path to feel easier. The first sign of discomfort, and they interpret it as a warning instead of a welcome. But real transformation never happens in comfort. If you want to build discipline, if you want inner strength that doesn't collapse under pressure, you have to learn to keep going when it stings. I remember seeing a man at my gym in his early 60s. He didn't move fast, didn't lift heavy, but he showed up every single morning. Some days he limped. Other days he looked like he was barely holding together. One morning I asked him why he kept coming back when it clearly looked painful. He didn't hesitate. He said, because stopping hurts worse. That answer stuck with me. It reminded me that comfort, while tempting, carries its own kind of suffering, the kind that builds slowly, invisibly. The suffering of regret, the ache of wasted potential, the slow decay of confidence. The Stoics understood this long before it became a modern mantra. They knew that you don't become resilient by avoiding resistance. You become resilient by walking straight into it, with your eyes open and your feet grounded. They didn't glorify pain for the sake of it, but they recognized its role in shaping virtue, sharpening judgment, and forging self-control. You don't build mental toughness by skipping hard things. You build it by facing discomfort head-on and choosing not to retreat. Because every time you step forward through resistance, you send a message to your mind that you're not ruled by ease. You are led by principle. You are driven not by what feels good, but by what matters. And that kind of identity cannot be bought or faked. It's built, slowly, silently, through reps done in pain, through choices made without applause, through commitments kept when no one would blame you for quitting. You see, anyone can act when it's easy. Anyone can show up when it's fun. But the man who still shows up when it burns, he's different. He doesn't wait for perfect conditions. He doesn't wait for inspiration. He's trained his willpower step by step, and in doing so, he's earned the kind of self-respect no one can hand to him. Growth is rarely visible in the moment. It doesn't always feel like progress. But every time you move forward in pain, you expand what you're capable of. You stretch the edges of your discipline. You develop emotional self-control, not by meditating in silence, but by choosing not to break when pressure is applied. So the next time it hurts, don't flinch. That's not the time to stop. That's the test. That's the moment that will either define your limit or redefine your identity. And if you push through just one more time, what you'll discover on the other side isn't just progress. It's freedom. The kind of freedom that only comes from knowing you didn't quit when it got hard. You stood your ground, and that's what men of purpose are built on. 6. Your morning is your first victory. The first 30 minutes of your day shape more than just your schedule. They shape your identity. Most men don't lose the day at noon. They lose it before their feet even hit the floor. They open their eyes, reach for their phone, drown in notifications, scroll through headlines they can't control, and by the time they stand up, they've already surrendered their attention, their focus, and their will. It's not harmless. It's a habit, and the cost is higher than it seems. You're not just checking in, you're training yourself to be reactive, scattered, and externally focused before the world has even asked anything of you. I once had a friend who told me, "Mornings are always a mess for me, but I get serious by noon." But what he didn't see was that by noon, he'd already told his mind who was in charge, and it wasn't him. When you delay structure, you delay self-leadership. And over time, you don't just lose time, you lose yourself. The Stoics understood that mornings are not passive, they are sacred. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, remind yourself that you are rising to do the work of a human being, not to complain, not to browse, but to live with discipline, to show up for your role, fully present, fully capable." And that mindset begins before the rest of the world even stirs. A man who wins the morning doesn't do it with noise. He does it with intention. Whether it's one glass of water, 5 minutes of silence, a walk in the early light, it's not about the ritual itself, but about what it represents. It's a vote, a declaration, a quiet act that says, "I choose to lead today, not to drift through it." You don't need to meditate for an hour or run 5 miles at sunrise. You need to begin with clarity. You need to start in a way that tells your nervous system, your body, and your brain, I'm not waiting for direction. I am the one who directs. When the rest of the world reacts, you've already responded. That's how a personal growth mindset takes root. Not in big leaps, but in small, disciplined starts. That's how building inner strength becomes less about willpower and more about rhythm. And that's how emotional self-control becomes second nature. Because you've already centered yourself before chaos enters the room. Your morning discipline routine doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to ground you. And when you treat it as sacred, it begins to shape your days differently. You say fewer things you regret. You make better decisions. You stop waiting for the world to set your tone. You set it yourself. That's how you build identity through daily action. Not from pressure, from practice. And yes, there will be days when you oversleep. Days when your thoughts race. Days when your routine gets interrupted. But discipline doesn't mean perfection. It means return. It means choosing again, not just once, but daily, especially when no one's looking. Because the real value of your morning isn't the checkmark. It's the man it makes you when the world throws its first punch. So don't just treat your mornings as the start of a day. Treat them as your first victory. Because the man who shows up for his mornings is often the man who's already won before the world even begins. 7. You don't need to change everything, just be consistent with one thing. When life feels like a mess, it's easy to believe the only way forward is to change everything at once. You look at your habits, your energy, your routines, or the lack of them, and you feel behind. There's this urgency to fix it all, to start over, to burn down the old version of yourself and rise completely new. So you set a dozen goals, write out a brand new routine, and by midweek, you're already exhausted, overwhelmed, and silently quitting all over again. This cycle isn't a weakness. It's a misunderstanding of how change actually works. You don't need a revolution. You need reliability. You don't need a dramatic transformation. You need one simple act that you do every single day, no matter how you feel, no matter how busy life gets, no matter what mood greets you in the mirror. The Stoics didn't chase extremes. They trained in the ordinary. They understood that consistent effort, not grand gestures, was what forged inner strength. And that philosophy still applies. Progress doesn't require perfection. It only requires direction and daily proof that you're becoming someone you can trust. When I was at my lowest, I didn't have the bandwidth for a full routine. I wasn't reading books or journaling or working out. I was surviving. But I chose one thing: water. Every morning, first thing, no matter what, one full glass. It sounds small, it sounds pointless, but that one act gave me something real. It was my anchor. And something interesting happened. After a few days, I didn't want to stop there. That single win created momentum. It shifted my story from "I can't stick to anything" to "I can stick to this." And that shift, from nothing to something, is the hardest but most powerful leap you'll ever make. Identity through daily action is not built in 30-day challenges. It's built in choosing not to break a small promise over and over again. And the best part? That consistency compounds. It starts shaping how you see yourself, which shapes how you behave, which then reinforces the identity even further. That's not motivation. That's self-discipline habits being born. That's emotional self-control taking form, not as theory, but as lived reality. And it all starts with one thing. Just one. Maybe it's waking up without hitting snooze. Maybe it's stretching for 5 minutes. Maybe it's writing one line in your notebook. What matters is that it happens, not when you feel like it. Every day. That's how mental toughness training works. Not by crushing massive goals, but by staying faithful to the small ones. So stop waiting for the perfect time to reinvent your life. Don't wait to feel like the man you want to become. Show up for one thing that honors who that man is. Do it today. Do it tomorrow. Do it until it's not something you have to think about. It's just who you are. Because that single drop, that one consistent act, becomes a ripple. And eventually that ripple becomes a flood. And when it does, you'll look back and realize the life you once thought was too far gone was never out of reach. You just needed to start smaller and stay longer. One thing, every day. That's how real change begins. And that's how it lasts. Discipline isn't a punishment. It's the foundation of real freedom. Every small act of consistency, every morning routine, every moment of emotional self-control, every choice to follow through when motivation fades, builds the kind of man who doesn't just survive life, but leads it with purpose. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be dependable. Your progress comes not from sudden change, but from identity through daily action. So start small, stay focused, and repeat. That's how you build self-trust. That's how mental toughness training actually works. Not through theory, but action. If today's message resonated with you, share your story in the comments. What's one small habit you're committing to? Let us know. Your consistency might inspire someone else. And if this video gave you something real to think about, don't forget to like it and subscribe for more content on self-discipline habits and how to build inner strength, one day at a time.